you've been thinking about this stuff forever. Game B was an explicit effort to figure out if we could get ourselves out of, the eddy that we were being flushed down to some new kind of self-governance that wasn't coercive and accomplished all of the things that it needs to accomplish and was resistant to capture and all of the things that we understood Game B to be about. There is a question about whether or not if it sounded like this style of thinking was of the right sort to figure out what to do with a property like Twitter that has huge potential to do both good and ill, right? He could create a council and, we could figure it out. And if we didn't figure it out, he could chuck us.
Yeah, we could buy us fancy dinners for, here's an idea, 3-day weekends every 6 weeks for a while, right? That was the pattern we used to cook up the Emancipation Party in Game B. And then when he decides we're not getting any value, no more free dinners, gentlemen. And I think we could cook up something for him. Yeah, I'm pretty confident of it.
I think so
all
too.
The people you and I know together, we've been thinking about this stuff in a way more nuanced way. Because I do worry about that. I do think that Elon and his move taking over Twitter has an opportunity to break the monopoly of these goddamn Silicon Valley blue church discourse chokers. But I also think that there is a chance he could fuck it up really, really bad and actually make things worse. And it's really important that he gets some good advice because he's a brilliant guy. But I made this point also online today. It's kind of weird jumping back into social media after, almost a month being away from it, because I did say when I went on sabbatical that I would come back to post my podcast episodes, which my producer actually does, so I don't have to dirty my fingers with the filthy environment of social media. But I also said I would do it when I posted essays, and so I did hop back in today. One of the things I made the point on was that Elon, as someone said, Elon Musk can figure this out. He's brilliant. And I go, yeah, he's motherfucking brilliant. But let's look at all the problems he solved. They all live in the realm of the complicated. They're engineering problems. Even SpaceX, which is magnificent, huge scale engineering, is still engineering. And when we say something is complicated, we means we can take it apart, put it back together again, and it will still work. Twitter is in the realm of the complex.
Yep.
It's basically networks. It's nonlinear. It's humans. It's game theory. It's agentic game theory, the worst kind. And unlike the complicated, you can't take complex systems apart, put it back together again, and they'll work. They're just different. And so I would put up as a finger up saying, yeah, Elon Musk is an extremely impressive guy in the land of the complicated, but he has really no expertise at all in the land of the complex. And while I believe he's so smart, he could learn how to use that lens. He needs some lens makers for the realm of the complex.
I absolutely agree. And, it's such an important distinction because to almost everybody, complex and complicated sound like synonyms, right? And until you spot the huge distinction and its implications for something like this, because whether you like it or not, Twitter is a living dynamic, with I don't know how many. Presumably it's billions of users.
Hundreds of millions
of users, each of which is a complex system in and of itself, which virtually guarantees that the interreaction, if it's anything other than stupidly simple, is going to be a highly complex system.
Yeah, each one's going to be not only complex adaptive system, but it's going to be strategic, which adds a whole nother level to the analysis, as it turns out.
Yep. So anyway, yes, whether it's complex systems is your fundamental bent or evolutionary biology, you definitely need some, at the very least, you need people who know that they don't know the solution and that you're going to have to basically use an evolutionary dynamic to solve any problem and that you will discover, unending unintended consequences along that road and they will have to be dealt with in real time. That is a fundamental piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, which is very different than building a Tesla car, or even more so, a rocket, where you have to be extremely disciplined, right? Extremely disciplined thinking could lead you into disaster in Twitter land. You're going to have to be adaptive in near real time, as you say, much like we talked about anti-utopianism. You're nudging Twitter in better directions. I actually closed out my essay with that point, which is anyone who thinks that any group of people, but specifically Elon, is going to get it right and do it perfectly from the beginning, no fucking way. The best we can hope for is that we'll be moving in the right direction and doing more smart things than we are stupid things. And that rejecting Elon because he's not perfection is the classic example of giving up the good for the perfect. And again, on the other hand, with Elon without the right guidance might not even be good. But I think there's a good chance that, particularly if they can find wise folks like you and me to give him advice, this will be a massive improvement over having our ideas of the green shoots of these new important ideas being stomped on by the peculiar oligarchs of Silicon Valley. And I think this will be great, but we'll see.
Well, let's put it this way. I said on Twitter the other day that this could be a disaster, but I would bet strongly in the other direction, because I am a believer that Elon has interesting instincts, and he's very good at problem solving. And so he's going to spot the part of this that nobody is equipped to handle yet. I will say, in your essay, you point to it's not really a TED talk, it's a conversation on the TED channel. And I only got a short way into it before I had to put it on pause. But I was struck because he is explaining in there why. So the question was, some of your predictions have been almost strangely spot on, but other ones have been way off. Why the distinction? And the one that was used as the exemplar for why are you way off sometimes was, when are we going to get fully autonomous cars? And what he describes is a series of diminishing returns curves stacked on each other. He calls them false horizons. And I was struck because this is actually an image from Heather and my book. We went looking for versions of this image. This is an idea I came up with years ago as I was working on trade-offs, which was my dissertation. And I realized that there was a parameter that was causing certain patterns to emerge in nature, and it has a very different effect in, for example, academia, where it causes fields to get stuck, right? Which is a pattern most people aren't familiar with. They sort of think there's always progress going on because there are always papers being published, but that's not how it goes, and there's a very good reason for it. But anyway, I was struck by the fact that he was effectively describing this figure in our book, which we, made great pains to construct. We couldn't just find a version of it somewhere because it didn't exist.
I'll tell you where it does exist, which is in the SFI and flavored study of innovation. What we have found is that innovation is a stack of S curves at various scales. And one of the ones that the people at Stanford Institute have studied more than most others is machine-generated motion, or actually motion in general. So you start out with walking, then you get a horse, and then it tops off. The best Arabian horse is only a bit better than a sort of half-assed horse you buy for $10, right? But it S's out. Horse ain't going no faster than the best horse in the world. And then you get a steam engine, right? You get a simple steam engine that's not optimized thermodynamically. It can't go faster than about 30 miles an hour. Tops out. Then someone comes up with a new innovation. Then there's another S curve. And if you look at the history of transport, it's S curve after S curve after S curve, with middle innovations like the more efficient condensers on the steam engines to totally radically new ideas like diesel, then diesel electric, and then gas turbine, then jets, and then rockets. And those are all separate S's. And so there's where I think you can find this idea laid out in some considerable detail.
Right. But the point is, you can also extrapolate from it. right? If you know that that's the process you're involved in and you're on your first S curve, then you behave differently than if you think, finally, we figured out how to do this, and then you're deeply into diminishing returns before you ever decide to do anything else.